Hey, well, it's Steve again, looking to do another one of my Hall of Fame binder um, videos about Tom Seaver today. I wanted to take a couple minutes before I do that and just talk about uh, a couple different things. One, I'm aware that I put out these videos, and if you don't know what this is for, the whole thing may confuse you. So I don't want to explain it every single video. But I do want to make sure that if you're interested and you want to check out kind of what I'm doing, you can find that out. So I'm going to put in the description. I'm going to try to start doing this every time I do one of these videos. Put in the description a link to at least one of the videos. I've done two that kind of talk about the project as a whole, but I want to maybe do a couple of put links to that, and then I did an update to my binder itself just to show the progress I'd made. Uh, and I'll try to do that again at some point in the future when I've made a little bit more progress than I have now. But anyway, I'm going to do that. But I wanted to talk about kind of why I'm doing this and how this may kind of alter a little bit of the way I'm approaching these videos. Um, One of the things that I wanted to do, one of the reasons for creating my Hall of Fame binder was to give me a way to kind of systematically learn the history of baseball and the history of the hobby. I talk about both of those in the video, and you can dive into your heart's content. But the learning the history part has been important for me. And as I've approached some of these videos, I've thought, well, I need to show a lot of cards and show, like, give as many options as I can. But I think that's kind of betraying the purpose of what I had for it. Like I'm gonna show players from now on. It's not that I won't do those, but what I've ended up doing is I've ended up doing a lot of players who have lots of cards in the 80s or early 90s, because those are inexpensive cards. I've picked up a lot of them, and I haven't done as many players who have cards early on. I did a Fergie Jenkins, but really, other than that, I haven't been diving into players who had the majority of their career before 1980. And I want to do that, even if it means I'm only going to show 2 or 3 or 4 cards, as opposed to feeling like I need to show 8 or 9. And I'm just doing that because I want you all to be part of the conversation. That was really the point of this from the beginning, of doing these videos. I want you to be part of the conversation of helping me as I'm learning the history of the game and the sport and these players, as I'm learning that, to be able to figure out kind of, okay, so what are some highlights of this player's career? And so I do research. I listen to podcasts. This is something I really enjoy this, because I do a player once a week. And so during the week, I try to figure out at some point a few days before which player I'm going to do. And then I go looking for podcasts. I try to find interviews of the player if I can, or just people who were fans of the player, and especially people who are fans of the player because they're fans of the team, or just because they're a diehard fan of that individual player. And so not just professional or people who know a lot about the sport, or people who kind of have a widespread knowledge. I like that. I do that as well. But I like to find people who are passionate about that particular player. And so I've really enjoyed that part of it. That's offered me something new with Tom Seaver that I don't know that I was expecting. I'll talk about that in a minute. But anyway, so that may mean that from now on I'll show less cards than I have previously, but I think that's okay. I've had videos where I've shown a couple of cards and ones where I've shown lots of cards, and get, people are positive, so positive responses on both of those. But let's talk about Tom Seaver for a minute. Tom Seaver is, in my opinion, one of the more underrated in the hobby, players in the hobby. So I recognize that he's kind of given his accolades as far as the sport is concerned. He's certainly one of the greatest pitchers in the 60s and the 70s. You should be talking about him in the same type of way we talk about people like Bob Gibson and Nolan Ryan and Steve Carlton. I'm just not sure we do. Probably more than Steve Carlton. That's maybe a bad example, but maybe that's wrong too. That's a discussion for another day. But I'm not sure that we do well with Seaver. He's just he was such a dynamic player. he was, right off the gate. Like, he was 22 years old, I think, when he came into the Major League Baseball, into the major leagues, and he immediately just began to light things up. He was Rookie of the Year his first year. He won the Cy Young early on in his career, won his first Cy Young in '69, followed that up with 2 more Cy Young awards in '73 and in '75. So I would consider those significant years. He also won a World Series with the Mets. And actually, it's kind of interesting. This is similar to my thoughts on Wade Boggs. Wade Boggs played almost half of his career outside of Boston, but when I think of Wade Boggs, I think of Boggs being a Red Sox player. I do the same thing with Seaver. I recognize he played for other teams, including the Reds, including the White Sox, but he's a Met. That is who he is. I think that's part of his identity, and I'm not sure. I don't think I'm gonna have any argument about that. I think most people see him as someone who played for the Mets, and that's kind of his career. It's certainly the highlights of his career. And so, despite kind of the Midnight Massacre and all of those things, which that was just fascinating to hear about, and one of the things, let me pause here for just a second. One of the things that struck me, one of the podcasts I was listening to was recorded shortly after his passing. So he passed back in 2020, and it was shortly after his passing. He passed away from a variety of things, but had dementia and just struggled in the latter years of his life. But one of the things that was like this recurring theme, these were all Mets fans who had watched him and remembered him from when they were children and teenagers, and remembered watching him and how kind he was, but stern, and how amazing he was to watch, and his just intensity on the mound, but how much fun he seemed to have in interviews, and but all of those things. But the interesting thing is when they would get to the part where they talked about him being traded, there were a couple of different people who they had clips from, who you could almost hear them break down. Like, there was one of them who you definitely could. You could tell he was crying as he was talking about Tom Seaver being traded away from the Mets, and he said then that Tom Seaver, he said when Tom Seaver got traded to the Cincinnati Reds, that was when he really discovered that he was a player fan, not a team fan. And he wasn't as much of a Mets fan after that. He was more of a Seaver fan. He followed Seaver as he went to Cincinnati, and I found that fascinating. So this is kind of the conclusion I came to. I might tag Mookie in this. I don't like to tag a bunch of people, but I know he's a huge Seaver fan and probably has opinions. But he might be underrated in the hobby. But I think the people who are Seaver fans are some of the more passionate player fans of the ones that I've encountered and listened to and been just kind of studying so far. I'm not saying the most or anything like that. I get that we all have our players that we love, but as I was listening to some of these people talk about their passion for Seaver and how they loved watching him play, it was fascinating to hear them talk about him. But anyway, it's why he has the nickname, by the way, Tom Terrific, but also has the nickname the franchise, and I like that nickname. I think that's a really cool nickname for somebody to have. Just another couple interesting things. He did get his 300th win. He got it as a White Sox player. He got it against the Yankees in Yankee Stadium on Phil Rizzuto Day. So it was kind of like all these things piled up against him. The really cool thing was, and he said later that he really was glad of this, but his 300th win was a complete game. Now, he's 39 years old. He throws a complete game in Yankee Stadium, and it was 143 pitches. 143 pitches. When we talk about things that would never happen today, I think a 39-year-old pitching 143 pitches is probably on that list. There aren't many people who are going to do that. But it was interesting, like hearing, I was listening to an interview with his biographer, and he was talking about how Carlton Fisk was the catcher that day, and there was at one point when he had walked somebody and they had people on the corners. They had one on first and one on third, and the coach came out to him, and I forget who it was because it was an assistant coach, because Lasorda, I think it was Lasorda was the coach at the time, and he had gotten kicked out of the game. He'd been fighting with somebody. Sure, arguing with the ref over something, or the ump. But anyway, he was arguing and gotten kicked out of the game. So anyway, so they were approaching Seaver, and Fisk comes out from his stance or from behind home plate and starts yelling. He's like, "You can't pull him out! You can't pull him out!" And got there, and Seaver was kind of feeling it a little bit, you know, and Fisk would not let him come out. He says, "You cannot come out of this game. This is your game." I think it was the 6th inning, so he wouldn't have had a decision if he'd come out. And Fisk just wouldn't let him. They ended up winning the game, of course, 4-1. He got his 300th win, and just a fantastic thing. The other interesting thing about him is we may not appreciate him as much, but Hall of Fame voters did. They voted him into the Hall of Fame at 98.8%, which at the time was the highest. I meant to look up where that ranked. I know it's at least second. I don't really know how high of a percentage, how many people have gotten higher than 98.8. I'm sure there's, I think Ichiro did, and so there's probably been at least 2, but I don't know. Anyway, but at that time it was the highest, so certainly Hall of Fame voters appreciated him. Anyway, I've gone on way too long, much longer than I like to go on these videos, so let me stop. I'll show you some cards. I'd take some opinions from you about which one of these cards you choose or which one you think I should choose, and we'll go from there. So let me start by saying, before I show you anything, that I don't have what I think might be Seaver's best card. I don't have his 68. I like the 68 set. I know some people don't. I like it. I think there are especially some cards in it that are fantastic. And his Rookie Cup card is amazing. And I don't have it. It's a card I would like to get at some point. So if you think that's the card I should have for my binder, please feel free to say so. You might encourage me to pick it up soon, as if I'm not encouraged enough. But let me show you what I do have. I do have a few of his cards. Not as many as I've had of other players, but actually a couple more than I thought I had. I have a 75. This is my earliest card of Seaver. The more 75 cards I own, the more the set grows on me. George Thomas Seaver. That's the card that's currently in my binder. And so, of course, I wanted him in the Mets. I could also do the 76. I have a couple of these cards because I'm a binder collector. Sometimes I have to have multiples of cards if I want them for multiple different sets, and that is part of the Turn Back the Clock set. So that's a 76. I also have a 77. This is the last of mine with him in his Mets uniform. I do not have his 84, I think it is. That's him in his Mets uniform, Mets cards. And so 77, that's the year that he got traded to the Reds. Speaking of the Reds, here he is in the 79. I know it's hard to see Seaver for some in that Reds uniform, but I do like this picture. I like to see pitchers in their motion. And you get to see him here as he is in his very, I don't know how unique it is, but certainly pretty unique pitching motion. Here he is in his 82. Another great card. Of course, as you get later in his career, you get to see all the different stats. 85. Just a good picture of him. And again, look at all the stats on the back. One more to show you. I have his 86 as well. Pretty nice looking card. If I can get it to stop focusing on his face on the 85. There we go. 86. Just another great card. Anyway, as I usually say, if you think one of these cards is the right choice, I'm not going to leave you with that. I'm going to leave you with the Mets cards because that's how he belongs. But anyway, if you think one of these cards, or you think you agree with me that I need to get that 68, you know, it's not that expensive for a card that's quite a nice card. But anyway, please feel free to share your thoughts. Let me know what you think, and we'll see you on the next one.